Welcome to part one of a three-part series for educators balancing student instruction with trauma awareness during the COVID-19 pandemic. Our objectives today for part one include, first, defining trauma. Second, demonstrating how COVID-19 related trauma may surface for your students. 3, explaining what actions educators can take to help counterbalance the negative effects of trauma. And 4, provide information about what to include in conversations about COVID-19 related trauma. Our community members are responding emotionally to COVID-19 as they would other natural disasters. The illustration in this slide demonstrates how whole communities historically respond in phases to disasters. And this is both natural and human-made. Our youth are on the same path, one that mirrors the grieving process in many ways. And it's important for educators to realize that students will experience varied levels of trauma and each will work through their own pace. An educator's first step to support student coping is to let them know that any feelings of distress are expected and accepted during this event. Having a conversation with a student or their parent or guardian about emotions expressed in the classroom, it's easier when educators are able to recognize and relay their understanding of trauma. An event is traumatic if it's overwhelming, painful, or scary to the individual. It also poses a threat to the person's physical or psychological safety. And in addition, the person feels their control of the situation is diminished, and they may even feel incapacitated. First and foremost, the virus poses a tangible threat not only to the student's physical safety, but also to their family and their friends. Their psychological safety is at risk, too, because their adult caretakers and scientists are just learning about the novel virus and how to fight it. The new physical limitations that we impose to stop the spread of the virus also limit ways young people have developed to self-regulate. Their learned coping behaviors may need to be adjusted or changed for an unknown time frame. Young people understand time differently. Their life experiences are limited to school and smaller communities of friends and family. They may not be able to easily foresee a future without the limitations of this pandemic. Parents and guardians may be having increased economic difficulties, and food and housing insecurity is on the rise. When a student is concerned about having even their most basic needs met, there's less room cognitively for learning new skills. It's important for teachers to acknowledge pandemic-related trauma for several reasons. Attention to trauma response will reduce further class time disruption. Beyond that, exposure to chronic, prolonged, traumatic experiences has the potential to alter children's cognitive development, which may cause longer-term effects in areas such as attachment. This means a student may develop trouble with relationships, boundaries, empathy, and may become socially isolated. It can affect their physical health as well, which can be impaired sensory motor development, coordination problems, and increased medical problems. Also, it can affect emotional regulation, meaning students may have difficulty identifying or labeling feelings and communicating their needs. Students who experience severe stress or prolonged stress are at increased risk for developing PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, acute stress disorder, anxieties, or depression. When a student's reaction to a stressor is much more intense than what a teacher expects, the student may have experienced a situation that triggers their trauma response. Unpredictability or sudden change, transitions from settings or activities, loss of control, feelings of vulnerability or rejection, confrontation or limits, loneliness, and sensory overload are common triggers. So how can a teacher support a traumatized student? Well, it's important to build relationships with struggling students. Create a safe and predictable environment with clear, consistent rules. Provide opportunities for students to meaningfully participate in class with some control and responsibility, perhaps even class chores. Embed mental health into the curriculum. Check your assumptions as a teacher, observe them carefully, and question what their responses are about. Be a model for appropriate behavior and relational skills, and work with students to create a self-care plan to address triggers. This is especially important during a time when so much of the learning may be virtual. I've introduced why teachers should address COVID-19 related trauma and how to spot trauma responses in their students. I've given a brief, overarching look at how to support students. But now let's learn how to prepare for a helpful conversation with the students or their guardians and parents about COVID-related trauma. Be ready to communicate information that will reach all of your students, including individuals and any family members with disabilities and limited English proficiency. Encourage students to take breaks from watching, reading, or listening to news stories about COVID-19 or other stressful events, including social media. If they are feeling overwhelmed or distressed, this is very important. Relay the importance of releasing excess stress hormones through exercise, boosting energy through proper nutrition, and finding time to relax, especially to ensure a full night's sleep. Encourage students to talk with trusted adults who have the ability to listen to their concerns and validate their feelings. Let students and families know about what your school can offer, including information on how to reach out to the guidance office. In addition, share helpful resources and facts about COVID-19 through trusted resources to counter the spread of misinformation and to mitigate fear. You can use CDC, VDH, and SAMHSA, for example. Let adults know about the National Disaster Distress Hotline. Convey contacts to mental health providers in your local area. Telehealth may be available to students and their families during the pandemic. When a student is feeling overwhelmed with emotions such as sadness, depressed mood, or anxiety, encourage the use of Virginia's Warm Line, for example, if it's a non-emergency and they just need to talk, national hotlines, or crisis text lines if it is an emergency. These may be used not only by the students, but also by their guardians or parents who want to support them. Remember, any suicide behavior or discussion of suicide must be taken seriously and reported. Encourage guardians to call 911 if there is an immediate mental health crisis, and let them know that they can ask for a CIT officer. In other words, one who's trained in mental health crisis interventions. Thank you for participating today. Please join us for part 2 of this series, applying what we know about adverse childhood experiences to student resiliency building during a pandemic. Then part 3 will specifically deal with trauma stewardship just for teachers. If you have any questions at all, please contact Central Shenandoah Health District Hotline or email us.